again, like it ties in a little bit to the knowledge and experience that we were talking about before, like the relationship between the two of them, okay? And I mean, this is like dense knowledge, right? So the way I see it, like you have this infinite shining, this infinite field of creation. It includes the dense aspects. It includes the subtle energetic aspects. It includes the non-manifest, the energies behind the creation or whatever, the intelligence behind the design, whatever. It's like the unconscious aspects that you can't actually experience, but you know must be there because the results are there, right? That this field basically constitutes the total mind of creation. So the mind of Ishvara, or the mind of God, right? Not that God's an entity. I mean, it's like, why'd they give it names? I think sometimes they give it names to support those who have a devotional approach to things, yes. Right? To give them something to focus on, right? And it's also human nature to personalize things. I mean, man in God's image or God in man's image, right? I mean, so let me finish, but because we have this total field, and for me, the individual minds are basically moving about this field. But I mean, you don't really move through a field of knowledge. You kind of reflect your surroundings or whatever. Like, I mean, moving from one thought to another doesn't really require a movement, right? I mean, so I don't know if you're familiar with Indra's net. It's a Buddhist kind of perspective, and it shows, they illustrate like an infinite existence of reflective spheres. And these reflective spheres are basically reflecting the spheres around them and so forth, right? And so in my perspective, it's not specifically something that Vedanta talks about, but in my perspective, Vedanta talks about the subtle body. This is where the identity comes in, right? So in reality, we have a gross body, gross realm of physicality. We have a subtle realm of psychology and thought and mind and identification or whatever. And then we have a causal realm, which is kind of like the unconscious or whatever, right? The karma and so forth. I've
heard that so many times, but I haven't quite grasped it.
Well, in India, you'll see guys with 3 stripes of ash across their foreheads. And this represents that they've burned the 3 bodies of identification in the fire of awareness. Cool. It means basically it's like, I know I'm not the physical, I know I'm not the emotional or the vibrational, and I know that I'm not even the karma, I'm not even the field that is like all this activity taking place or whatever. I'm the consciousness that's beyond all of these, mm-hmm. Right? And I lost my train there a bit. So anyways, I mean, our experience so these spheres would be like the subtle body, because it's where identification takes place, like this kind of reflection of consciousness in the mind, right? Like the mind has the capacity to reflect awareness. So this is why it's so natural to seem like the entity is aware, right? Because the entity is kind of like a mirror, right? The mind is kind of like a mirror, like reflecting its proximity in the reality, right?
Doesn't the net also have to do with kind of the profound interdependence of everything as well? Like there's a real sense of
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because the whole Buddhist interdependent thing is kind of something that Vedanta will challenge, but there's 2 things I want to say about this. So the first one is that the Buddhists kind of suggest that awareness rises with the objects. That if there's no object there, there's no awareness, right? And so somehow or another, it's different awarenesses arising as objects, but different objects. But I mean, it's like they want to dispute an eternal, permanent, conscious aspect, right?
They do dispute that?
This seems to be, yeah. I mean, some aspects of Buddhism, they do, yeah.
Buddha did not recognize the concept of neither God nor the soul or self.
Yeah, I mean, there's different schools of Buddhism, so it's always a bit of a challenge, right? Even in Vedanta, there's like Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta and dual Vedanta,
Yeah, and they're
where,
qualified.
whereas the experience is like deemed to be something that's the objective as opposed to recognizing the truth, right? But with the Indra's net model, if the sphere is the subtle body, the reflective mind of the apparent individual, and there's a causal realm beyond that, then the causal is kind of this formless space or whatever that all the subtle bodies appear in, right? Now, if we were to, like, my teacher would he would draw it out in a different way. He would kind of draw it as kind of levels, right? And it's sort of like a reduction sort of going on. Like, you start with a formless reality and you zero in on some kind of a form, right? And if you have a physical form, you are also going to have a subtle aspect to that form, right? Again, the knowledge of it or whatever. And you're also going to have like the causality or whatever that brought that into being, right? And so you have this kind of reduction going on. But that's a two-dimensional depiction of a reduction, right? If you consider basically formlessness is like even beyond three-dimensional, but it's like it's complete, and somehow or another this thing shows up. It's not a two-dimensional reduction. I mean, it's a reduction, right? I mean, it's a reduction, right? That's coming from formlessness into a form, like, so it's coming from all sides, so it's more spherical, right? So this depiction of like a level in a funnel, if you round that out,